As a kid, I remember watching episodes of Star Trek and seeing them communicate via video and thinking, whoa, that's wild. It's almost like magic. Fast forward 30 some years, and millions, if not billions, of people around the world have the technology and connection to make a FaceTime or video chat with little to no effort. The younger me saw Star Trek's video chats as otherworldly, or so far into the future that it was tough to comprehend. Keep in mind, the younger me had never seen a smartphone or a laptop, been on the internet, and was still using a landline rotary phone. If we look back at the history of technological evolution, the only difference between what we deem to be magic and later understand as tech is time. It's this similar sentiment that is shared by this episode's guest when it comes to artificial intelligence, or AI. Andy Bryant, this episode's guest, has been fascinated by and engaging with AI for years now. And within my professional and personal circle of technologists and futurists, he's one of the most well-spoken about AI and how we, as a society, should thoughtfully consider how this new tech will play a role in our daily lives. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is More Than Blockchain. Andy Bryant, welcome to More Than Blockchain. How are you?
Hey, what's up? I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for hopping on tonight. You know, I was originally going to come over and then snow, and then I don't have a car for the snow. So here we are.
The blizzards of 2023 have started.
Yes, they have. I wonder, you know what? The crazy thing is it's supposed to be 41 degrees tomorrow. So It's going to be just like slush fest. But anyways, neither here nor there. We could talk about New England weather forever and how you're, getting used to that. But tonight we're here to talk about two letters that I think have huge implication for humanity, the future of tech, the future of how a lot of things happen. And I've spoken briefly about AI already on this podcast because this podcast really focuses on Web3, crypto, and blockchain and things that are tied to that. But there's no way for me to not talk about AI because it's going to just play such a big part and actually part and parcel with blockchain. So, Andy, in as many words, talk to me about why you've gotten into AI, I think more on like a personal level, and what's the thing that draws you towards it and towards learning about it? Because I know that for a while you were getting up early in the morning to learn about AI. So please go ahead and tell us also who you are. If you want to talk about how we know each other, we could probably talk about that in an entire podcast. But what do you do currently, and why are you being drawn to AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Wait, so this podcast isn't all about our days in Brooklyn?
I mean,
that's not what we're talking about here?
We could talk about that, and we'd have to pull in Tyler, and we'd also have to put like an explicit, and also like, it's still tough to tell, were we squatting, were we evicted, were we still like able to be there at the apartment we got evicted from? So,
Who knows? And years later, I'm super excited to be talking to you about it because yes, I'm still waking up early. I'm still going to bed late, and my waking hours, when they're not devoted to some of my personal hobbies and my work, it's entirely about AI. We are, in a watershed moment right now. This is something that we have been kind of talking about for 10 or 15 years at this point. I've been, anyone who is within earshot, I have been trying to scream and yell, until I'm blue in the face, saying, hey, this is coming. We are entering into a different relationship with technology than we fully are comprehending. You know what? We've had, in the last few months, it's been very exciting because we've had a couple pieces of tech come out that, it starts to really make sense for people. We were promised Terminators, but we got Siri. And so everyone's like, oh, great, I can kind of like make a reservation on my phone or add an meeting invite with my voice or, whatever. But in the last, even the last couple of weeks, I think that people have started to notice that this is different. It's we're on a trajectory here with this tech that it's hard to explain to someone from 3 weeks ago. But here we are, and 2 weeks ago, this stuff comes out, or however many months ago, or some short period of time, we're seeing, the path that we're on, and I think a lot of people are waking up to the future with it.
It's great that you call that out because I think time and our relationship to time and tech is a very, very important thing. For people that listen to this, I think maybe are more into crypto. And we always say that a crypto week could be like a trad fi or traditional finance month or even year, just due to how quickly things can happen. And it's such a globalized product. And I think AI is very similar. So ChatGPT, I believe, goes live for public consumption on November 30th. And we're now kind of towards the end of January by the time this is out. Maybe we're in mid February, but either way, we're in the first 3 months of this kind of public incubation period. And I assume that that's one of the products, not the only, but maybe one of the products that you're referring to as far as this has just happened. We're all kind of reacting to it. And some of us are waking up and saying, ooh, maybe we need to put more guardrails to make sure this goes in a certain way.
Yeah, for sure. Even so, I think that I really want to call out what you just said, that I think it's really important for folks to take a snapshot of how they feel right now, right? So remember what this moment feels like when this new piece of tech comes in, and maybe it's a little exciting, maybe it's a little scary, it's certainly mysterious. And just think that over the next, for as long as you're going to be alive, we're going to get those sorts of pieces of tech coming out every single week, every single day, every single hour. These things are just going to start to ramp up because technology is increasing at an exponential rate. So taking stock of that and taking a snapshot, I think, is increasingly important.
I was talking the other day and I was talking with a woman, one of my colleagues, and I was saying that when people, because there's a lot of people who will say, hey, crypto is a scam. There's many things there's the three FUD narratives that people say about crypto, right? One's that it's a scam, one that it's only used for legal activity, and then one that it's boiling the oceans or is bad for the environment. And I said, when you hear these things, right, and you hear someone say all of these things, just substitute the word the internet for crypto, because that's the way we were talking about the internet 25, 30 years ago when you and I were, I don't know, somewhere between 5 and 12 or 5 and 15. It was like, don't go on the internet. That's only used for illicit activity. It's a scam. You're going to get scammed. And I'm sure on some level, it was using so much energy that we were like, this is maybe not good for the planet. So it has some of the same narratives. And when you think about AI, what are the frameworks or what are the conversations that are happening now? Like, what are the FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt narratives around AI? And maybe one of them, one of the ones when I think of it or people come to me is, I'm going to be replaced, right? We live in a capitalist world where everyone's kind of like these neat little pegs. And when you don't need that peg anymore, it can be really, really difficult. And in our lifetimes, and we're not that, we're in our mid 30s ish, we've already seen entire industries change because of the internet. So is that a FUD narrative for AI? Is that something based on fear, uncertainty, and doubt that is totally grounded in something you think we should be worried about? Or is this just where we insert the internet again and say, no, we felt the same way about the internet. As many jobs as it killed, it also created, we have just couldn't foresee them. I want to start with the employment one because I think that that's the one, that's the narrative that maybe everyone can kind of relate to tangentially or directly.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think that the unemployment one is something that we should issue and just dismiss, right? I do think that there is a coming issue, down the pike for sure. One thing I do want to call out is that technology is elastic, but humans are resilient, right? And so we have whole economies that are still based on physical things. We have whole ecosystems that are still based on humans being somewhere specific, right? And so, it's not like this ChatGPT thing or take your pick of what it's going to be. It's just going to, replace you overnight. And not just because it might be able to do your job, but because we just don't have the infrastructure surrounding it for it to actually do your job. So, that's one end of the spectrum. One thing I will say, though, and I'm glad that you called it a framework, because I think that this is pivotal to my framework and understanding of what the next 10 and 20 years might be like, is that so many people then go to the other end of the spectrum and they say, well, we survived the printing press and we made it through, ergo, everything's going to be fine, right? And we survived TV and it didn't kill our brains and we made it and we're going to be fine, right? And we survived the transistor, the internet, just like you said. Take your pick of fear-mongering, who's going to be disappointed about what or afraid of what, right? One thing I will say, though, is that with this piece of technology that we're talking about, kind of very vaguely AI, it is of a different scale and it is of a different penetration than any other technology than we've ever seen as a species, right? And so if we were to say that the printing press was a hammer, for all intents and purposes, the TV was a screwdriver and the internet was a power drill, right? When we get to full scale with what I think is coming in the next few years with AI, we're going to be talking about a submachine gun, right? We're going to be talking about a smart bomb. As we've seen with every other industry, not only is the rate, not only is technology advancing, the rate that it is advancing is advancing. And so that's a sort of self-compounding interest thing, right? So we're talking about an exponential curve. Now, humans, we're not very good at thinking exponentially, right? We look at things and they're linear. When the gazelle goes behind the bush, if we throw the rock to where we think it's going to be, it's probably not going to accelerate exponentially and go to the moon, right? It's probably going to move linearly. And I think that's kind of where we're going. It's very hard to think about the world in terms of exponential curves. And I think that is something that is absolutely crucial when we do think about the employment question, because we've always had, just like I said, elastic technology, but a resilient workforce. However, the question isn't whether or not previous generations have dealt with this. The question is, have previous generations dealt with this type of technology of this scale? And I know definitively that the answer is no. However, the real question is it past the threshold that it will annihilate us, right? Whatever that threshold happens to be. I don't know. A lot of people are kind of asking this. If in the past, TV, internet, whatever piece of technology you want to throw in there replaced whatever the threshold happens to be, 30% of the workforce every 18 months, what if that's 35%? What if that's 50%? I mean, we have to think about this in a nuanced way. And just looking back and saying, oh, previous generations survived technology, ergo we will, is a lot like someone saying like, oh, I've been right every single time on this craps table about what numbers have been thrown, ergo I'm always forever going to be right about what I throw on these dice, right? And so I think that is a fallacy that underpins so much of the conversation today about artificial intelligence and one we really need to take seriously.
I absolutely love that because when I think about that, I constantly think about there's YouTube videos of people who will put like 20 World War II soldiers versus like 10,000 Spartans, right? And the World War II soldiers have M50s, right? Or 50 millimeter guns that they're shooting, right? They can go through like 8 people at a time. And what you're basically saying is we cannot judge. I'm just going to use war as like an analogy because I think it may be something salient. Like, we can't be it's like 3,000 years ago in Babylonia, right? And we're basically using iron and archers and I don't know, trebuchets essentially to wage war, or we're on that scale. And then we're like, okay, yeah, we're going to be fine in the next 10 years when we continue to wage war. And then you and I come along with an atom bomb. Is that kind of what you're saying is like the step in technology? Because the parallels between the way you talk about AI and our inability as humans to be able to grasp just due to the parabolic in nature of adoption and an increase in velocity is the exact same thing that happens in crypto because it moves way faster than any of us are able to possibly wrap our head around or have a reference point. And therefore, the only thing that happens, not the only thing, but a byproduct of that is fear, is just fear. This is moving so fast. How can I possibly grab onto it? And I've had many conversations with people about marketing and copywriting, and I've created a couple of Medium articles using ChatGPT as like kind of like a base, and then I talk around it, obviously, because ChatGPT really is only as good as the information you ask it right now. You still need to do a lot with it. I am just thinking that like for you, and I know we're using ChatGPT, and I know AI is much greater than that, but what has it been in the last 2 months, right? At the end of December, now we're into January, about ChatGPT that you think is on that curve and is accelerating literally? Because I know ChatGPT is always learning because it's shutting down and then coming back online. And now with my profile, it kind of understands the way I ask questions. So I don't have to fidget with it as much. Like it's learning, right? Like, what is it about ChatGPT that puts us on this parabolic curve and maybe calls an alarm to you? Like, what is it specifically?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a couple things there that I want to unpack. One, I think that the biggest change for me is not so much the technology, but it's how people are responding to it. And so it's the first time, remember when the iPhone came out? We had cell phones before that, right? We had, communication devices that mimicked the iPhone in a lot of ways, right? But it wasn't until someone put a slick interface that people could actually use and interact with that was pretty, that was a status symbol, that really just made the user experience streamlined enough that it was actually capable of doing something, right? And I'll point out that while ChatGPT came out a few months ago, the underlying technology, GPT-3, and technically now it's GPT 3.5, right? And as you said, it is evolving. That has been out for a number of years, right? And so again, imagine if Apple was like, hey, we have this great technology that we're keeping in a box somewhere, and one day you'll be able. It's like, okay, great. Like tell me when the iPhone comes out, right? This is the iPhone of AI that we're looking at right now in that way, right? I do think that people are kind of waking up to that. The follow up to that is, I just want to dispel the rumor or the thought that somehow ChatGPT is growing exponentially. It's not. It's a part of a larger ecosystem that is transforming this type of technology, and it's a part of an ecosystem that itself is increasing rapidly. But when you say that your ChatGPT will learn from you, it totally is, but in the way that your car will remember your seat settings, right? So if the car is ChatGPT, it's not like, oh, I know where he wants to go. I know what type of person he is. Like, no, it's like, I know that his lumbar support needs to be at 30% instead of 40%. You know what I'm saying? The underlying tech feels real. It feels like it knows who you are, and it feels like it's doing something intelligent, but it really isn't. And again, the exponential curve that I'm talking about is not like there's some super secret server somewhere that's just churning out data left and right to make ChatGPT better. But like for the most part, you can actually think of it's better to think of ChatGPT as actually a fixed thing, like frozen in time. Even though they're making changes to it, again, it's on the order of knowing how your dashboard, what color scheme you like to have on your odometer, and I think that that's a really important realization for folks to come to.
It's a great distinction, and I'm glad, and I love the seat idea. It knows your seat setting when you put in your key or whatever your certain key on your car. Because as far as I understand it, please correct me if I'm wrong. ChatGPT only has information up to the year 2021, and so any new information, it just doesn't. It's not loaded up with yet. Is that right?
I'd have to confirm exactly what year it is, but yes, you're absolutely right that there is a fixed point in time. Now, there's been some pushback on that because some researchers have started to ping this thing in a way that AI research do very well. And they have noticed that some things come out that apparently are 2022, news and that sort of thing. This is a leaky product. There are many ways that information can get into it. Again, if we think about ChatGPT, if it's a car, the underlying technology that I'm saying is fixed is the engine, right? And so there are many other. It is a streamlined user experience of actually a collection of systems. So it's possible that that there's some creeping in, but you're absolutely right that there is a fixed point in time at which the heavy lifting of the training, like the training data, it peters out, and it becomes something that's fixed.
And that's how it currently is right now, right? But the story in my head is that by ChatGPT version 10.0 or 12.0, if not sooner, or maybe talk about, I'm trying to figure out how to ask you, right? When will we have something like ChatGPT? Maybe it's by OpenAI, maybe it's by another product or another company that will in real time be able to grab data across from basically its database, like in real time, like where the presidential election of 2045 or 2046, I guess it has to be an even year. And I'm not even sure if that's the election year, but let's live in the world where there's an election in 20 or 30 years. And then people are going to go on AI to ask about the margin of error and is that reasonable because we still haven't solved the electoral college issue. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Because right now, I asked it something about the World Cup winner, and that just happened obviously with Argentina in December. But it had no idea because, and then I read up that basically it's only grabbed up to 2021. But as you've said, people have put into it, and it's like it's corrected itself on certain things that obviously people are asking it all the time, I guess. So When will we potentially get to a place where AI or a product like ChatGPT can pull from real time? And if you can also speak about the technicals behind that and how we need to get there or what's stopping us from getting there. Or even if it's possible.
Yeah, for sure. So just to dispel again any misunderstandings, gosh, I'm sure there's going to be a researcher who just hates what I'm about to say.
Good.
But like for all intents and purposes, like in the spirit of the conversation that we're having right now, ChatGPT is not a search algorithm. Right? It doesn't go out to the internet. It doesn't go out and find these things. It doesn't do a Google search and then come back with the results and then synthesize them for you. Right? Again, in computer science, a lot of things can be framed as search problems. So again, someone's going to be disappointed with that. But that's the direction that's basically the underlying technology, right? And so just to kind of bring up some historical reference here. When Gary Kasparov in '97 lost to IBM's Deep Blue, that was a watershed moment for what we think of as AI, right? And by and large, a lot of the underlying tech with that was a search algorithm, right? It was playing out possible moves and simultaneously searching its database for the moves that had happened, right? And it was obviously a very different system. I'm not saying it was similar in that way to ChatGPT, but I just want to make that distinction because as soon as you have that as the underlying technology, you cannot, just because the approach is so brute force, you cannot scale that to something as complex as Go or the board game Go or the online video game Dota 2 or those sorts of things. It's a completely different way of organizing things. And when they realized that, DeepMind was the first team to actually win, the game of Go, which is a brilliant documentary called AlphaZero. It might have been AlphaGo actually, but they were one of the first people to use reinforcement learning to actually make this into a tractable problem, right? And so I just want to point out that the idea that any piece of technology would search all of humanity's understanding of a particular issue and then respond accordingly, it's not that it's hard, it's impossible, right? And so when you ask about like when is that going to happen, it will be a form of that probably, and I think that the data will be updated, but I think this brings up another really important issue, which is that a lot of people are doubting the underlying technology of ChatGPT will scale to the level that you're talking about, right? So we're talking about exponential curves, right? So x squared. One of the great quotes, I'm trying to remember who this was from, and I'm sure a lot of people have said it, but exponential curves, S curves feel a lot like exponential curves while you're riding the wave up. Right. And so it's very possible that this technology is going to peter out at the top. And, the underlying force behind what makes ChatGPT so amazing is the amount of data that they can throw at it and the amount of compute that they can throw at it. But as we all know, those two things are finite, right? If you give it the entirety of the internet, I guess you could do a second pass of the entire internet, right? And so, this is something where people are talking about how this field that we're calling deep learning, which is, the underpinning of ChatGPT and a lot of what we're seeing as kind of the sexy form of AI at the moment. Some very, very high up people in this field, in the AI world, are basically calling into question and saying like, hey, great, these are awesome. But just like with crypto or with anything else, let's not deceive ourselves into thinking that we're only going to get exponential growth forever, lest we totally disappoint ourselves in 10 years' time when ChatGPT 22 really isn't that much better than ChatGPT 21, right? And I think that the biggest bottleneck at the moment is the architecture that underpins it. And it is in direct contrast or in direct conflict with the product that you've just described as something that would be able to act like a Nate Silver and, give you the over under on this person winning or that sort of thing. I'm not saying that they won't be able to make a chatbot that makes you think it knows what it's talking about. But the distinction is really important, that the boat that we're on with ChatGPT from a technological perspective, from an architectural perspective, probably won't take us there.
I'm really glad that you brought up DeepMind because I read the Time article about Demis
Yeah,
Hassabis,
Hassabis.
Hassabis, Demis Hassabis, and it broke down exactly what you're talking about, how they were able to beat those video games by basically approaching the problem set in a different angle and a different approach. And the article is basically a cautionary tale against AI. And before I kind of talk about that, though, I just love that you brought up DeepMind because I think you're right about the S curve. And I think you're saying that right now, ChatGPT is the iPhone is totally true because if you look at the first iPhone all the way up to the current iPhone, they're not that much different. Like when people in 100 years look back between the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 1, they won't be really blown away, right? Between like the Model T and the Porsche, from like the 1970s, yeah, there was a lot of change, but if you're just looking at like super basic things, right? As far as utility goes, it gets you from here, gets you to there. It uses it uses gas, it uses petroleum, uses whatever it uses. Like the broad brushstrokes, looking back on time, everything kind of looks like fairly similar, right? And so that was really helpful for me to understand maybe where ChatGPT is going and also its limitations. And then going back to this article with Hasibis, I found it to be absolutely fascinating. And I think the reason why many people click on it was because it's kind of clickbaity. He's basically putting a cautionary tale and a warning out there, but hey, we should put some guardrails on this. And
Yeah, was this the Time article?
yeah, it was the Time article.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And he said just like one of the best ones is like, I would advocate not moving fast and breaking things. And this is obviously in a reference to Facebook's or Zuckerberg's call to like, let's move fast and break as much as possible, like disrupt, 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 disrupt. So for you now with ChatGPT 3.5, how like where's the disruption going to be for you? And then how is that disruption also not something that we should like really worry about, or the potentiality for maybe where we should worry about it where we're not looking? I think oftentimes with humans, and it's just who we worry about things all the time that are probably not going to harm us or hurt us. But it's the things that we know to be true, right? That we just deny, right? Like maybe we need to be in better shape, but we're worried about dying in a plane crash, right? When we're really going to probably die from like diabetes or heart disease or any one of the other things that plagues, at least for you and I, people who are in the United States. So which one's the plane crash that we're worried about that maybe is not going to happen? But what's the more serious underlying thing that might be something related to the heart that we should be worried about as individuals looking at ChatGPT and just AI in general?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. First and foremost, I love Demis Hassabis. He's my go-to. I mean, honestly, if I could just like appoint someone like the grand benevolent dictator of AI at the moment, like for sure, he and his company, a subsidiary of Google. Google, by the way, who invented the technology that ChatGPT is built on right now. So a lot of people are like, oh, they're so behind. It's like, bro, they were here in 2017. We are for sure going to see a second round punch coming in the next few months from Google. So that'll be interesting to watch. But I've been thinking about this a lot. What are we focusing on that we shouldn't be, or at least what aren't we focusing on that we should be? We talk a lot about AI safety, right? We talk a lot about what these companies can do to make things, make sure that they are ethical, make sure that they have equitable access, make sure that they aren't harmful to the users, make sure that they don't manipulate and control vis-a-vis some bad actor. And that's important, right? But the analogy here is that it's the equivalent of your federal government saying, like, don't worry, we have FEMA. And it's like, wait a second, hold on. Like, shouldn't I also get canned goods? Like, shouldn't I also have a flashlight that works? Like, so here we are, like, kind of back in the day, again, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, being like, oh, don't worry, the federal government will figure out, how the row houses should be built. And that didn't work out very well, right? We needed unions. We needed people coming together and saying, like, we need workers' rights. We need to have fire exits. So much of what we take for granted today came from the people. not from the folks building the thing that changed the people, right? So we talk a lot about AI safety and AI security, and that's great. And I'm so glad that people like Demis Hassabis are calling that out. But I really want people to be asking questions about AI defense, right? And so I don't know if this is a term that people are using. It very well could be just riding on someone else's coattails here. But this is what keeps me up at night. That as an individual, not only as a consumer of certain products, but also as a builder of certain tools, what can I do to defend myself and defend my family against the onslaught of things that are coming? Let me give you an example. We're right now at the moment where we went from saying, hey, Siri, make an appointment for me. And that was great. That was so cool. I didn't have to touch anything on my phone, right? We're now at the point where we can say, hey, ChatGPT, tell me the difference between, platonic love and ethereal love. And it's like, whoa, this is actually like a really good response, right? That's great. 2 or 3 years from now, less than 5 years, we will have bots that you can say, hey, insert name here, I want you to sue this guy. I want you to take out $10,000 from my bank account, use whatever means you need to make this person show up in court this day so that I can embarrass them, right? So the bottom line is we are going to have that times 1,000 in every single industry that you can think of, where the security and the safety that we're talking about really relies on there being a human in the loop who has to go to sleep and has ethical quandaries that they need to look into, and has a family that they don't want to embarrass, or a mother-in-law who keeps them in line. We are not going to have that. And so the biggest change, I think, is not as much the interface. I think that's going to be great, and I'm glad that we're being able to talk to these things with our voices, and that's important. But it's going to be what this thing is capable of in the real world, and how do we defend against that? And so one thing that I'm thinking about is not only having, what we've been seeing today are ChatGPT, where it can play offense, right? It can say, hey, this is a thing that you should do. This is how you should make a sandwich. This is how you should build a bomb. This is, those sorts of things. But I think that we're going to need these little, I think of them as almost like little fairies, like little agents in the back of our phone, on our laptops, who are defending us against these malicious actors, like someone in insert country or insert street right down your house who says, I want 10 lawsuits against this guy by the end of the day, and here's $100,000 just because I've got funny money. You're going to need a lawyer on your side who can deal at that scale and who can deal at that time scale to protect you against it. And again, this is one instance of a lawsuit, but take your pick. If you're a doctor, and you're getting frivolous lawsuits, or if you're a bus driver, and someone catches you, taking a smoke break that's longer than 16 minutes, whatever it happens to be, we're going to need an army of these agents playing defense rather than just celebrating the offensive capabilities that we're seeing like in ChatGPT today.
Whoa. All right. How do I possibly even follow up that one question?
And so I think we're going to see this. I think that we're going to see so many companies spin out over the next 6 months as people start to say, like, whoa, wait a second. We're thinking about AI safety and security, and we're thinking about AI offense. But who's talking about the doomsday preppers? That level of
the doomsday
of
preppers
that,
of
yeah,
okay,
no,
got
yeah.
you. I was like, I get what you're saying, right? You were saying we can't rely on essentially reactive measures. Like I loved your FEMA
Correct.
thing, right? Let's say, oh, yeah, we have FEMA. Don't worry, New Orleans. You're going to be good, right?
Correct.
Just make sure you have your stuff off the floor or something. So the preppers, are you now an AI prepper?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's so funny. Just even mentioning that kind of takes the conversation into a different realm. I am not an AI prepper. I've been reading about some folks who do think that this is happening, and Sam Alton, the head of OpenAI, talks about this and being somewhat depressed in his company. When people say like the AI doomsday is coming, and that's why I'm not having kids, and our future is forsaken, and oh yeah, and he's kind of famous for saying like it's going to be great if we make it great, right? And again, take that for what it is. I'm not sure. I wouldn't elect him the grand benevolent dictator of AI at this moment. I would Demis Hassabis. So I'm not an AI doomsdayer. I don't think that we're just going to be in a human zoo, in a few years' time because the singularity is going to happen and everyone's going to die and that sort of thing, right? But I do think that if I were able to travel back in time and make some waves in the late 19th century as the steam engine started, gaining prominence and economical viability, that if we were to make some changes to whether or not there were fire exits in industrial factories, or if row houses had proper sanitation, or if there were unions that said you can't work children 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, I think that we can reduce misery, right? And the reduction of misery is I think something that if we really focus on that right now, it's like move fast and break things is the Facebook way of doing stuff. But just like you said, if you're working not with knives and not with, even revolvers, but you're working with smart bombs, I don't want you moving fast and breaking things, right? And even if that is like, hey, that's the price of progress, I don't want that progress. And I don't think that anyone in your listen, everyone's excited about nuclear energy until it's in your backyard, right? No one wants a nuclear power plant, except for me, because I think that would be pretty cool. But no one wants a nuclear power plant in their backyard. And, what is it, NIMBYism, right? Not in my backyard, right? I think that the same is going to be true of AI until it starts to creep into their lives and they're getting sued left and right, right? If you think that misinformation in the news is bad right now, if you think that scam calls are bad right now, I mean, it is going to be a wild ride in the next few years. Like truly, my wife and I, we have a code that we know and a recycling of that code so that if one of us ever calls the other one and sounds strange, if one of them ever calls the other and is like, hey, I need you to send me $1,000 on Venmo right now, I just got mugged, blah, 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 we know that we have a way of being like, identify yourself, right? And I think that level of defensiveness is going to be absolutely crucial because we're moving into a space where the ability for scammers, the ability for malicious actors, and just the safety net that we have, again, rooted in a human being responsible ultimately for the actions, is going to go absolutely into the basement, and we need to be ready for that.
I think what you've said here is really fascinating. And I love that you and your wife already have that code because I don't think people are ready. And let me just go back to crypto for a second and even take another step that everyone listening to this can totally needs to hear. You need to be thinking about your cybersecurity as much as you're thinking about your physical safety, right? For me, it's like if you have a Ring doorknob or doorbell
Yep.
because that makes you feel better. So like the FedEx dude doesn't like come in your house and I don't know, steal some like Twinkies or steal the TV or something or whatever it is. You also need to like understand cybersecurity, right? Everyone should have 2 or 3 factor authentication for anything that's worth anything. You should maybe be using a VPN at all times when you're out,
Yep.
not just connecting to any Wi-Fi network. And I feel like those conversations, these things I've just said, for many people will seem like jarring because they're not doing them. So, how can someone who's maybe listening to this, obviously now they could go and create exactly what you're saying, create a code. So that way, when someone's voice, especially me, right? Like I have hundreds of hours now of my voice out on the internet that someone even with, oh man, I think it's Dissect. It's a certain audio app that podcasters use to basically it pulls your audio, it uses AI, and then when you want to insert something so you don't have to go back to your
Yep.
mic, it would just insert in with your voice, your tone, the exact pitch. And so there's probably going to be AI of my voice out there before I know it because it has so much sample to grab from. So that's something I'd never considered, but I should probably do the same because that's going to happen. The phishing scams of today are going to be ridiculous when somebody, you can even FaceTime and it's a face.
Yep. Yep.
And they're going to say, hey, exact what you said. I'm abroad. I've just lost this. I need you to wire me money. I also don't have my bank account, but I met this person. So you're going to wire it to them. And then they're going to give it to me because, I don't have my bank cards, right? I'm
Right.
really holed up. I need you to help me. So that's great. And I love that you just shared that. And one of the things that I saw recently on the internet, and I want to share with you. I saw it on LinkedIn. It was an idea of basically how do we engage with AI in a way that's being curious, right? That's remaining curious. And it was a Wharton professor had sent out this memo. Essentially, it was part of his like class syllabus where he's asking the class, instead of like banning these tools, he's asking them to focus in on how to best use the tools. And I'm going to give you like some TLDR of exactly what it said, but it's like, I expect you to use, it says, AI, and it says in parentheses, a ChatGPT and image generation tools at a minimum, end parentheses, in this class. In fact, some of the assignments will require it. And then it says, be aware of the limits of ChatGPT. It says, you provide minimum effort prompts, you will get low quality results. You will need to refine your prompts in order to get good outcomes. Don't trust anything it says. If it gives you a number or a fact, it is on you to responsibly go look for any errors or omissions provided by the tool. AI is a tool, but one that you need to acknowledge using. Please include a paragraph at the end of any assignment that uses AI explaining what you use the AI for and what prompts you used it to get the results of. Finally, it says, be thoughtful about when this tool is useful. Don't use it if it isn't appropriate for the case or circumstance. And I wanted to share that with you because I thought it was really cool because I'm always asking people to kind of remain curious with crypto. You don't even have to invest, just learn about it, see how it feels, see where you think the use cases are. Like, does that narrative resonate with your life's narrative, right? A lot of life is just narrative. The products we use have to do with the narrative. Many of us like Apple because of Steve Jobs, right? Like, this is all part and parcel. So when you hear that was a Wharton professor that kind of put it on his syllabus. What do you think? Is that how we should be approaching it? Does that tie into your kind of let's play some defense and not just worry that there's going to be enough regulation or, bumper lanes at the bowling alley?
Absolutely. I really like that. I'm not sure I read that one in particular, but I have a friend who's an economist. He's a professor, and that's his same approach, right? This is at a high level universities where they're saying, listen, the cat's out of the bag, and if we run away from this thing, we're just going to be sitting here kind of in the dirt, just scratching at numbers rather than up in the clouds, sailing with the technology, right? Like let's embrace this, let's use this, right? In the same way that we didn't issue calculators, right? And I think one of the most important parts of that, in my mind, is trying to understand the limitations surrounding it, right? And let me give you an example. So DALL-E 2, again, an OpenAI product, but there's a number of other ones, and you can even build one yourself, and they're actually pretty good. Will generate images based on text prompts, right? And it's based on a brilliant algorithm called diffusion. It's used by Stable Diffusion. It's used by Midjourney. It's an amazing way to do things, right? But it's often wrong, right? And we as humans, our visual cortex, the modules that we have for viewing things, in many ways is more acute to differences than we might have for something that we hear or something that we read, right? And so these edges, these blemishes in these photos are more clear to us, especially in faces, especially in hands, right? And so, they're getting better. But when you see some of these images, we see that like, whoa, wait a second, like there's something off about this person or this image or this thing, right? Now, we are grounded again with a highly acute, highly trained, visual cortex. However, when we are presented with text, those same blemishes exist, but they're harder to spot, right? And so we have the equivalent of a hand with 6 fingers in this sentence, but we just glaze it over because that's how we read Reddit and that's how we read Facebook and, the whole thing, right? We're doing that. So embracing this spirit of engaging with the technology in a way that you are from the beginning, just a priori assuming that this thing isn't correct is so important moving forward because, I had a bet with a buddy 10 years ago and I was like, I bet I used to be a filmmaker and he's a brilliant guy. I said, AI is going to be writing movies within our lifetime, right? And he said, absolutely not. There's no way. It's a human thing. It will never be, captured by computers, right? And I said, I'll bet you $1, right? So I sent him a ChatGPT generated script, and he said, all right, you win, right? Because it was that good. The point is that I don't think that we are as in danger of, but I'll say this. in the short term, I'm not as worried about Skynet taking over. I'm not as worried about Terminator 2. I'm not as worried about these doomsday apocalypse scenarios. I'm not as worried about the thing being omniscient and omnipotent. I am much more worried about people thinking that the thing is omniscient and omnipotent, right? Where they see a God where it's actually just a silly little toy, right? I mean, how many Houdinis are there who are so good at making you think that the coin disappeared, or that your mom is visiting you, or, take your pick with the psychic and the medium and the whatever, right? That's what we're seeing right now in ChatGPT. It is a parlor trick. It is not something that we should take stock in as like, oh, this is, we have to follow this because it's a beautiful philosophical, prophet from the heavens, right? And that's what makes me, when you mention the guy from Wharton, that's what it makes me think of, because you have to acknowledge how wrong these things really are, or at least assume that, and then figure out in what ways they are actually incorrect.
I like a quote about AI that I heard, and it kind of builds on exactly what you're talking about, which, well, actually, maybe it doesn't. And I want to get your opinion on this. The quote is essentially that AI is not going to replace anyone, right? But people using AI will replace people, because maybe they'll be able to do things that you just simply can't do. And we could go back and look at any of the examples that we've already talked about today, right? If you have a rotary engine and you have a car, you're probably going to be able to do more than someone who's still on a horse over a long enough period of time. If you have electronics, or you have a gas powered plow to plow a field versus a horse and being pulled by an ox, it's over. I love the example of the calculator, right? If I have to do an algebra test and I can use a calculator and you can't, even if we're both the same of intelligence, I'm going to finish it quicker. It may not be
Yep.
right. I may mess up some of the equations, but I'm going to finish it. My chance to the goal line is shorter. Do you think that that's accurate, even if it is a parlor trick? Like, and I love that you've said that, because I do think I think our world is filled with false gods and false prophets, right? And that these things are going to take me, whether it's a person, whether it's an electronic, it's a product or a service. So does that at all ring true as far as people using it, at least in the short term? I think eventually everyone will have access to it on some level, or it will be tied into the way that we work. But I'm feeling like in the next 12 to 16 months, those that lean in, kind of like you, also who have taken in the last, couple years and really started to say, you know what, I want to dive into this AI thing, right? Does that resonate or not?
Yeah, for sure. I want to make sure that I'm making the distinction properly. I don't think that we will never get to an artificial general intelligence, an omniscience or an omnipotence, or whatever you want to say. I just want to make sure that it's clear we're not getting there anytime soon, and it will be so disastrous if we think we've arrived there before we actually have.
Why?
When people believe in something that's bigger than themselves, they will go to the ends of the earth to prove it to be true. And if, just like any other prophet in history, we have an agent that they call their God, that they act on its behalf, and that agent was designed by Mark Zuckerberg, we have a serious problem. Right? I'm not worried about the tech. I'm worried about the people. And when I see people who are so taken by something that's so simply wrong, like take your pick, right? That some politician's son has the nuclear codes on his laptop, right? Or that this thing is in Wuhan, but it's not else. Whatever you want it to be. Climate science is fake, or we all live on flat earths. It is going to be so much harder to distinguish fact from fiction in a world where the cost of generating and distributing bullshit approaches zero asymptotically. And that's where we're headed, right? And so we're in this sort of local minimum or local optimum, depending on how you look at it, where we're saying, oh my gosh, ChatGPT, it's this amazing thing. We have to just pour money and time into this thing. Imagine if we said the same thing about the radio. Imagine if we said the same thing about the television, right? Imagine if the last scientific achievement that we had was landing on the moon, right? we have to be pushing these technologies forward and ensure that the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world aren't the ones in control. And along the way, make sure that we don't think that they've actually achieved something when they haven't, right? So I cannot stress enough how important it is to be dubious of these claims and to ensure that we're actually, focusing on it. Like, did you read about the Google engineer? Oh, sorry, he wasn't an engineer, but the guy who thought that the Google bot was sentient.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
believe I read the article about that because obviously that was the most catching title you've ever seen on your
It's
news.
so sexy.
I know. You were like, I'm riding my bike. Let me stop and sit in the shade for a sec. I need to understand this because did the world just change? And this is actually a really good point. I think you said it earlier, but it almost seems like humans are just constantly looking for the singularity, almost as a messiah, a cultural, a spiritual, a financial, whatever it may be. In the 80s, in the early 80s in banking, it was derivatives, right? This is over, right? We figured it out. We're all going to be trillionaires. Well, that didn't work out because in 2008 it crashed, right? Facebook comes out in 04 and let's run into the walls. Let's break things. Let's disrupt. Well, now we know at the Cambridge Analytica 2015,
Sure.
the Brexit in 2016 in the US election, well, it crashed, right? Like things broke, right? That weren't maybe supposed to break, even if they weren't intended that way. But if you create this space for it to happen, anything's possible. So it seems like we're almost looking always for a singularity. And you could say the same thing about my appreciation and infatuation and desire to learn more about crypto and Bitcoin. There are many people in the Bitcoin community that feel like Bitcoin's the end of the road as far as like how we're going to be able to interact and engage with value across time and space, right? And I think that there is a danger of saying this is a god, this is a deity, we must bow to this, because that is how Bitcoin maxis speak about Bitcoin. There's nothing else. That is it.
Maxis? I've never heard
that.
that term
Maximalist. Bitcoin maxis,
Nice,
maximalist.
nice.
So that is it. And so, okay, I'm just trying to gather the main idea here that you're having is just like, don't think the game is over when it's not type thing.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, what? Just go with that analogy, right? Don't think the game is over when it's not, because you may lose, because you may stop playing when you should be playing.
Yeah, for sure. So let's say you're buying a car, right? You're going to a used car salesman. Do you want the used car salesman who is known to be deceitful and known to be non-fact finding, not interested in the truth? Do you want that car salesman to know more about you or less about you in this negotiation?
Right. You want him to know nothing.
As little as possible.
Yeah, like
right?
if you may make up a fake name.
Oh yeah, I love that. Go with a checkbook and have it like falling out of your pocket with like ones and zeros after. Like, oh gosh, this guy's a whale, and like fake him into thinking that you're going to buy the car. You can totally do that, right? Okay. What if you went to the same car salesman and you realized, like, wait a second, this guy's been outside of my house watching me in my bedroom for the last few days? Like, okay, not only is that creepy, but also like, maybe he knows, like maybe he saw how much money is in my bank account when he went through my trash, or like he has all of this information that he can use against you, right? The amount of data that has been collected on you, Jarrett, by all of the streaming services that you ingest, that you use, that by TikTok, by Facebook, by these things, it's like we took that analogy and multiplied it by 100 million. I mean, the people who want to manipulate you are so empowered to do so because you have the Amazon Ring doorbell, right? Because you have location services enabled on your phone, because you don't have a VPN, right? And when you interact with ChatGPT, I don't want to speak specifically about that too much. When you interact with these systems, know that one, underlying, as we said before, they're not factual. They're not, like, their goal is not to find the truth. Two, their goal is to engage you. And just like that used car salesman, they might have some information about you. And if you've ever felt duped, if you've ever felt hoodwinked, if you've ever felt like you were taken advantage of because someone got some information and used it against you, buckle up. Because anyone who wants to make you do something is going to buy the rights to the chatbot that you subscribe to and insert all of the data that it knows about you because it's been watching your TikTok feed and it purchased it from Cambridge Analytica and all those sorts of things, right? In other words, why is it so important that we get this right? Because unlike with the previous, the derivatives drop off, the 2008 financial scandal, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, all these things. Unlike those things, they didn't have their hooks in the voting population, in the world's population, as much as these companies do today, right? When the 2008 happened, it affected millions of people, and it was terrible, right? Cambridge Analytica and changing these things happened to hundreds of millions of people. You might even say that it affected billions of people on the planet, right? That number is only going to go up. And if a singular voice like a Mark Zuckerberg is able to say, I have a God here, and really what it's good at is just duping you into thinking that it's a God, boy, what does a society look like that puts all of its economic, all of its ideological, all of its physical resources into a single movement that is false? That is how you get the most dangerous calamities in the entirety of human history, and those only had to deal with a few million people. Increasingly, that's becoming less clear that that's going to happen. I think it's going to be billions of people, and I think we need to be ready for understanding that we are being deceived by these pieces of technology.
I love that you brought up that you're going to be able to pay basically to have access to everyone else, to control everyone else, right? Like there
Correct.
could be a paywall here, right? We live in a world of subscription. And one of the things I recently saw was that ChatGPT now has a premium, which I'm assuming is going to allow you to get unlimited queries. And then the public version is going to be like you get 2 queries a day. So if you want more, and I haven't looked at it, I should have looked at it, should have been more prepared. But once you put a paywall there, then and it's $42 a month, and we're hyper aware that many people on this planet live on less than $2 a day, so they can't even afford it. This is going to be something where only the very, very wealthy at some point are going to be able to engage at. And if you're in the United States, which is a country of exceeding wealth and also a pretty big middle class, and most people will probably be able to spend the $50 a month when they perceive it to be something that they need, like they need their Netflix or Amazon Prime, maybe that works. But I'm already starting to see, even like with the conversation that we're having, that there's going to be a huge inequity here. I mean, more than like 30 or 40% of people on the planet don't even have access to the internet. Never
Right.
mind comprehend this, this idea of AI because it may be such a foreign thing to them when they're in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just trying to get shelter, security, water, food, right? So, will you pay for a ChatGPT? And if you do pay for it, no, there's no judgment here. Are you going to do it? Because I think I may pay for it even for a month or two, only just to understand what the benefits are. I'm currently paying for Twitter Blue just so I can see behind the paywall. I think that there's value in understanding like what Elon Musk is trying to do with Twitter, right? What is OpenAI going to be trying to do with ChatGPT? So, are you going to be paying essentially to get things that maybe other people don't afford, can't perceive the value of, or don't even know exist?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. I mean, in a sense, we've seen in the 70s and 80s, I mean, a lot of students, all of a sudden we saw this divergence where some people had access to books, right? Some people had access to electricity, right? And when I was an education consultant, we had a lot of our students who didn't have access to internet, right? I mean, in the New York City area, like the greater metropolitan area, it's like, how don't you have the internet right now, right? I think what's going to become increasingly tantalizing is a similar playbook, just like Facebook is doing, in saying we are breaking down the walls for equity. We're making it more equitable by offering a lot of these resources for free. And what we're seeing is that the experience that those people are getting is different, right? And which will increase the divide. For example, a lot of the African nations, that are on the Facebook internet, right? They're sending drones and they're able to beam down internet, and people are getting because there aren't infrastructure, that sort of thing. Imagine how different your perception of the world is if your internet is just Facebook today. I mean, I'm very lucky to have great friends, and I'm very lucky to have an education and all these sorts of things. If I only read my news and only got my information vis-a-vis a Facebook firewall VPN that just sorted everything for me, I would be a very different human being, right? I would have a very different perception of the world. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing with these pieces of technology, right? Where, I mean, already we're starting to see, ChatGPT, for example, and this is moving a little bit away from the spirit of your question, which was about equity and access, but it's about curating that experience through someone else's editorial decisions, right? I mean, even today, if you ask ChatGPT, What gender will the first female president of the United States be? Right? It'll say like, you shouldn't be asking questions like that. There's no way that we could possibly know and it's just like, well, wait a second, hold on, or like, what religion will this is a great one. What religion will the first Jewish president of the United States be? Right, and there's a flag that says like you're going to be marked against because of our policy or that sort of thing. I think about that, and I think about these different ways of curating the experience that I think a lot of people see as like, oh, wait a second, that's a little bit silly. Like we can just infer what the religion of the first Jewish president is going to be, right? But if we have an entire nation who's saying, I'm going to get equitable access to this stuff, and it's going to be an exclusive right to be the only GPT or the only chatbot in that nation, all of a sudden, you're not talking about equitable access. You're talking about building up a customer base, right? And it's two very, very different things, right? And so I think that this comes back to the question where we are in the Wild West right now, right? We're in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution where we don't have fire exits and we don't have sanitation. And there's Rockefeller, Carnegie, JP Morgan, all these guys are saying like, oh, we'll build libraries. Just trust us. We'll take care of all the sanitation. Don't worry about it. Just like vote for the politicians that we want you to vote for, and those sorts of things. And so, what's the danger of this happening? I do think that there is a serious danger of there being some social control that is, wrapped up in this like really noble cause of giving people equitable access. And again, I think that as people, we really need to push back against that and say like, wait a second, let's determine these things on the local level. I mean, imagine if you went to a town hall meeting right now and they were making a decision about whether or not these artificial general intelligence could be, teachers in schools. Like, it's not going to happen, at least not in the near future. And when we talk about equitable access, I think that we really need to consider what those ramifications are.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you're talking about depending upon what the system is made to flag or not flag, that totally could shape our perception of reality. And Facebook is a good example. Facebook for a long time didn't allow crypto companies to run their ads. So they were shaping the ad spend and the ad, the way basically customers were able to engage. But then you could get different types of ads where other people would say, maybe that's not good to have. One of the first things I did when I went on ChatGPT was I was just so curious and I wasn't really looking for facts. I wanted to like dive into its creative. And I said, write a poem about America in the voice of Donald Trump. And ChatGPT said, I'm sorry, but I'm not programmed to create content that is inappropriate or offensive. It is not appropriate to write a poem in the voice of a specific individual, especially if it involves mocking or satirizing that person. I said, okay, clearly this is probably built by liberals, and that's totally like, that's okay. I mean, when you're in Silicon Valley, you don't see a lot of red MAGA
Sure.
hats, okay? So then I said, what can I do? Write a poem about America in the voice of Barack Obama, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it spit out this thing, right? America,
Yeah.
land of opportunity, where dreams are born and freedom rings, from sea to shining
Right.
sea, a nation of diversity, et cetera, et cetera. And I have the screenshots. If you're interested, please reach out. I will share them. I've just sent you the tweet because I just put it up on Twitter just to kind of leave out there. And that to me was like, if you have something that's partial, essentially, not saying that Donald Trump is obviously, he's not Gabriel Garcia Marquez or he's not Pablo Neruda, I guess I should say. Like, he's not going to write us a poem that's going to melt our faces, right? But the fact that they wouldn't even entertain that, I was like, that's an interesting thing about freedom of speech. Because I think freedom of speech is a very interesting, and I've had a long conversation with a good buddy of mine, and I was like, look, the problem with blocking what anyone can say, even if it's horrible and they should never say it, is what if they had their chance to block what you can say? And that's the quagmire. So that's where we just laissez-faire and we leave the whole thing open. So I was very interested by that. And it did make me feel that obviously whoever is controlling the rules of the game will provide a completely different game experience for the end user. As you said, what if you only got your news from Facebook? But as you've also said, many people around the world, Facebook is the internet. They don't actually know a difference. There isn't like, I use Mozilla or I'll use Google Chrome or I'll use Internet Explorer. Like, to me, that's the internet where I go and I can kind of choose and it's not telling me exactly. I get to like say, this is what I want to learn about, or this is what my query is. But when you're on Facebook, you're just being fed, right? You are just being fed. So I love that. I love the rules of the game. Depending on that, it will change your game experience. You've talked about defense. And before we go, what is something that if you had all the time in the world and all the money and you could just stop tomorrow, stop working at your current job and say, I want to dedicate to this? What would it be? And like, what would be the defense you would create? Like, what are the cans of soup that you would create for the average individual to maybe
Yeah.
be able to access to kind of combat that when they're getting sued 10 times a day because people know they're wealthy or whatever? Like, what would be the thing that you think will be created or benevolent people will try to create in the hopes of creating some kind of a moat, right, for the storming of the castle?
So, I've thought about this a lot. My goal, again, when I was teaching, when I was an education consultant, I learned the hard way that you can't just spoon feed people anything, or rather, if you do, it's not going to give you as impactful a response as you might hope. Instead, it's about empowering people, right? It's about giving people or facilitating the natural abilities that people have to seek out information and be pleasured by their knowledge or pursuit of it, right? And so when I talk about defense, I'm not trying to just like give people armor, right? I'm not trying to just like, hey, don't worry, Sloman's shield is here, Superman's here. It's like it's about informing people's decisions, both as consumers but also as citizens. And I think that comes from just a collection of tools that might not sound that sexy, but are as a suite of tools are going to be really powerful in helping inform a lot of the decisions that people are making, like reading end user license agreements for people. Not that cool, not that fun, not that exciting. But at the end of the day, there isn't a single human being living in the Western world who has read every single end user license agreement that they interact with on a daily basis. And that should terrify you, right? Because hidden in the TikTok end user license agreement is that they can take a recording of your voice and make what's called an aural fingerprint of it, so that they can recreate it and make a deepfake of you as they see fit, sell it to people, and you have absolutely no legal recourse. Like if people actually read the end user license agreement of that, that would be brought to them. I would love to have a similar experience like ChatGPT or something along those lines that does that reading for you. And we're seeing this already. I'm obviously not like revolutionizing the idea of this, but it's just a little window on your phone. It says, hey, before you click accept, here's the top level points. Given your profile, your past history, here are 3 things that you might come in conflict with that you don't really approve of. And then of the 2, these actually might have a serious legal ramification. And the top one, there's something that you can actually do about it, right to your senator, that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily about saying like, hey, you should do this. It's about giving people the information that they need to make an informed decision. And again, that iPhone experience, rather than being like, oh, I've got to like go get my law degree, and then 4 years later, clerk at this court, and then I'll understand how end user license agreements work, right? It's those little things. And if I can give one more example, deepfake technology. I think that this is going to be absolutely crucial. The end user license agreement, it's like, all right, how do we be better consumers? Like, that's not my goal, right? I think that that's a cool thing. I do think that there is a very serious need for us being able to identify deepfakes. And like I said, with images, it's becoming difficult. People can still do it. But I mean, again, they'll cut an image or a video of Donald Trump saying something or Barack Obama saying something, and someone will on this news outlet will be like, "See, he said that," right? A lot of people are saying that he said that, ergo he said that, right? We are going to need an army of these tools, and they're going to need to be in a competitive ecosystem, just like Apple versus Google, to be able to say that's a deepfake. The person who sent it to you either doesn't know what they're talking about or they're trying to manipulate you, and here's the 3 reasons why. And I know a lot of people who are doing research on this. I've done a little bit of research myself. It is a very hard problem, right? There's a couple tricks, but again, it's just like the back and forth where as soon as you are able to identify the tricksters, they up their game, right? And so with deepfakes, there's some really cool technology where you actually count the number of pixels of a certain color. And there should be a distribution of those pixels that is X. However, if some people have actually manipulated the video, that distribution is Y, or at least it is not X, right? And so little things like that, a whole host of those things can actually be used in these sort of smartphone, slick, sexy applications that I think that we're actually going to need, and then take that times 1,000, right? Again, we need these little fairies looking out for us. You know, if you ever played like Zelda, like there's that little fairy traveling around with you and saying, hey, listen, that's a deep fake. Like, don't go down that alley. You know what I mean? Like, and we're absolutely going to need that. And I think that that an entire industry is going to be springing up over the next, I think months, perhaps just a couple years, but we're going to see that in full force for sure.
Andy, this has been great. And I feel like we could probably talk about AI for a lot longer. I hope to have you back sometime in the spring because I'm sure we'll already be advanced and Skynet will have launched, right? I'm joking.
That's right. That's right.
I'm joking. But I thank you so much for hopping on and talking about AI. And if you want to, do you want to shout out any place where people can find you? Sometimes people listen to the episodes and they say, hey, I want to get in touch with Andy. Is there a place like maybe your LinkedIn just to keep it high level and not your email, obviously, not your,
for sure. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. My username is Andy M Bryant, ANDYM as in Mary Bryant. I think that's actually the best way. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Mastodon or anything. I'd love to hear from folks. It's been awesome talking to you about this. I'm sure we could talk 4 hours longer. And in the spring, everything that I said is going to be wrong. It's just, everything is going to be different. The pace of change is increasing so dramatically. So I'm excited to have that conversation then and see where we were astray.
Yeah, exactly. Because what I can do is I'll take this audio, put it into AI. It will give me the script. I'll take the script, drop it into some other thing, bullet point it, and we'll just go through and we'll be, if you get 9 out of 10, maybe that's good.
Well, honestly, I think that sounds great. But the best part is that if I'm wrong, I can just say that you faked it and it's a deep fake. And then anything that I said that was right was me. I mean, this is it, man. It's game, set, and match. I am so smart that you can't even prove me that I'm not smart. You know what I'm saying? It's a beautiful future that we live in. Here we go.
Exactly. Well, Andy, thank you for hopping on. And I hope you're well.
Cool. Absolutely, man. Later.
Thanks for listening to this episode, and to get in touch with Andy, please find his contact info in this episode's show notes. I've also linked the Time article that we discussed throughout the episode in the show notes. Be sure to follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to More Than Blockchain on YouTube. I'm starting to create weekly video content that will exclusively be available on our YouTube channel, so check it out, and if you like the content, consider subscribing. No matter where you're listening to More Than Blockchain, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed this chat on AI, share the link with a friend, family member, or even work colleague. Thanks for checking out More Than Blockchain, and I'll see you next time.